Hello, hello, hello. I'm your host, Tracy Otsuka. Thank you so much for joining me here for episode number 262 of ADHD for Smartass Women. Before we start, do not forget my brand new book with HarperCollins William Morrow. It's called Ask Women. It is now out. Of all of our learnings here that we've had together on this podcast. And you can order it at ADHDforsmartwomen.com/book or where you get your books. In fact, not you can order it. Please order it. Please, please, please. So now on to the podcast. You know, my purpose is always to show you who you are and inspire you to be it. And in the thousands of ADHD women that I've had the privilege of meeting, I've never met a one that wasn't brilliant at something, not one. So for all of these reasons, I am just delighted to introduce you to Maya Ann. Maya lives in regional Australia and was recently diagnosed with ADHD the week before her 39th birthday. Just checking to make sure my mic is still going. Maya has an undergraduate double degree and honors in civil engineering and geology and a master's in geotechnical engineering. She works as a geotechnical engineer, mainly in underground mining. Go figure, ADHD. Maya is here to share about her personal experience, divergence, and coercive control. Like many undiagnosed ADHD women, she fell into a situation where everything within the household was responsibility and her fault if she didn't get it right. Now she is choosing to use her trauma to educate and discuss the issue of control. Maya and her kids are now thriving post-separation. She is starting to find herself allowing empathy, educating others, being a better parent, and just being happy. She recently got a new little poodle who was meant to be her fourth child. He only has eyes for her. And suddenly she ended up with a boyfriend as well, or instead?
Yeah. Probably instead. Yeah, he doesn't care much for the kids. He loves me.
But did you get the poodle?
I did get the poodle, yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's both, right?
Yes,
It's not
yes,
instead, it's
yes,
as well.
yes.
So did I get all of that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Wonderful. Yes. So let's start by talking about your diagnoses first. Can you tell me how that came about?
Sure. I do just want to stop and say thank you for creating such a great podcast and with so much informative information and such an amazing network of women. It's pretty phenomenal, and the fact that you've done it yourself.
Thank you.
And yeah, for me, I did get recommended by someone else with ADHD just at the gym, and sort of started listening to your podcasts and got, I think, to an episode about 140 and sort of started yelling at you about choosing the right partner in life, which you say is sort of crucial with ADHD, and I had not made that decision. So I ended up yelling, what about if you didn't choose the right partner, Tracy? And so I ended up emailing you about the issue of neurodiversity and coercive control, being that I think there's a little bit more of a link there. But
okay, so hold on one second. So just so I understand, someone had told you, have you considered ADHD? And so no?
No, so sorry, my diagnosis story will come in a minute. So I'll tell that. But I knew I had ADHD at that stage, and someone just said, you should listen to these diagnosis stories on your podcast. But then as a result, I went back to episode 1, listened to a lot, and the theme for me, obviously going through separation, was that you need to choose the right partner, and I unfortunately did not do that. So that's why I emailed you to say,
got it,
and need to talk about this. And I didn't actually expect to be the person talking about it, but there you go. And the more people I talk to, the more people are in a similar situation to me. So okay, I think to talk about it more.
One thing that I want to say, I know when I say that, and I say it often, how important who you choose to be with is. And that is your partner, your intimate partner, but also friends, people who you hang around with, who you work with, right? It's your environment. It's so important. And the reason I say it all the time is because, number one, I believe it's really important. You can do so much work on yourself, but if you have someone always in your ear telling you, how awful you are and, you're a loser and you can't get anything right and you're stupid, I don't care how much work you do. You've still got that on your shoulder, right? So it is really ensuring that you're never going to do as well as you could without that person. And so I just want women to know what they deserve, that they deserve to be in relationships that have ease, they're fun, and they're full of positive emotions. And if you're not feeling that, if you're instead feeling for discomfort and like everything is hard and you're not supported, I want them to know that they deserve more, because they do deserve to feel positive emotion. And I think the world is enough. You need a partner that you completely trust and know that come hell or high water, he, she, they're going to have your back. And so that's why I say it, not to be cruel, but you knew that, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So
back
tell
to the
us what happened then.
So I'll go back to my diagnosis story. So, just with my diagnosis came very quickly, which I actually didn't mind, because I know a lot of people suffer with hurdles of time and trying to get into the right people to get the diagnosis. So 12 months ago, I knew my life wasn't going that well. So I was just not achieving. I wasn't a good mother. I wasn't a good wife. I wasn't a good friend. Wasn't a good employee. I wasn't a good daughter. Sort of, I was failing in all parts of my life. So everything was on me. I was trying to do more, get more done, staying up 2 hours a night, trying to do things for my kids, and then getting up early in the morning for work, trying to do more there. So in this part, I suppose the critical part for me was always my children. So I chose to seek help over positive parenting, essentially. Being just post-COVID, there was a lot of issues with trying to get into psychologists. So I ended up with a provisional psychologist who was mature age, so she was very good. But on, I think, my third session, I chose to use these sessions for myself. I thought I needed to be fixed and I needed to do things differently. So I was only talking about me in all these sessions and none of my other issues, because I'm the problem, I'm the issue, so I need to fix myself. Walking out of the third session, I was literally out the door as in the session finished, and she said, "Have you ever been tested for ADHD?" And I was like, "No, why? That's, people with ADHD don't function, all that sort of stuff." And my perception of neurodiversity was very different to what it is now. And sort of between there and paying, I messaged a school friend and said, "Oh, my psychologist just mentioned ADHD, haha." And she's like, "Don't be surprised. No one got diagnosed in the 80s and 90s. And I went, "Oh, hang on. I didn't expect that response." So I sort of Googled online some of the online questionnaires that you can do, and ticked 100% of the boxes, of course. And then the next, it was weird though. I was in shock, but I wasn't surprised. So the shock only lasted like 24 hours. Rang my psychologist the next day and she was like, "Oh crap, I've done something, haven't I?" And I'm like, "Yes, you have." So we did the assessment the next day, and I scored very highly there.
Can I ask you, so this idea came up, and then did you go home and studying about, well, what does ADHD look like if it's not what I thought it was?
Yeah, exactly. So up until that point in my life, which was September last year, I knew zero. I absolutely knew nothing about neurodiversity or ADHD or anything else. It's not something that even I would have considered. I'm considered quite successful, and yeah, I thought those people struggled more with life, I suppose, and couldn't, hold down jobs. Maybe, I don't know. I just thought it impaired you so much that you needed assistance all the time. So
have ADHD and have a double degree and honors in civil engineering and geology and a master's in geotechnical engineering and be working in an underground mine as a geotechnical engineer. That's kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah, well, and I had no idea. It just not like, I knew the naughty 5-year-old boy is probably what I knew growing up that had, would take stimulants to calm down essentially. But and I never looked into anything. It's not something that's ever been mentioned to me in my life or thought about, or even that I do think differently or that I am different. It's never been brought up for me. And like, everything's just always been my fault when I didn't understand things or I didn't comprehend how things worked or social situations. It was always just, oh, well, you're intelligent, you should get this. And I was like, well, I didn't, but okay.
So my you during this time, were you still married?
Yes, I was. Yeah. So I was married at that point, and so I knew things obviously weren't that good with my husband. So my psychologist at the time did the referral to the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist is there's only one in our region, so I have to travel now to see him, but literally just does meds. I've asked for, what strategies can you use or whatever, and he's like, I don't know, talk to your psychologist. Like, that's not my job. And I'm like, okay, cool, give me my, and meds do work for me, so I choose to use them for work. But I don't use them every day.
Can I ask you, what do meds do for you? Do they kind of slow everything down for you?
Yeah, so I'm using dexamphetamine. So it just allows me to focus and sit, I think. I do notice I am a bit more chatty on them too, so I just got to be careful not to be too social, because I do like talking when everything's just clearer, and it's just the pathways, I suppose, stay on track a little bit better so that you don't lose your thought process as much. So starting my journaling, I can't really focus on books anymore. So I only read one, A Radical Guide for Women with ADHD. And the solution with all of those seemed to be medication, and then everything was fine. And I was like, well, okay, I get medication may work, but it won't change my personality. And I started to look at things in my life. So
did you still think, though, it's all Maya's fault? There's something wrong with her. She's defective. Horrible. But now that.
Yes, but now I had a reason, right? I go, okay, I'm defective. I have ADHD. So it could be seen as an excuse at that time, I suppose. But I was like, well, this is probably the reason why I can't get things done around the house, and I don't get as many things done.
Yeah.
Well, I can't do my work properly. There's a lot of things I was like, well, the reason would be my ADHD. So I sort of saw it as maybe a bit of a positive too, because I knew obviously things weren't going particularly well with my husband. And so I went, okay, this gives me a reason, to try and do things differently and work things out. But so I was a little bit scared to tell him, which is always, a red flag, of course. So when I actually did tell him, all I wanted probably was
can we back up for 1 second? Because I totally want to get into all that. But what I want to know is, first, is this whole ADHD diagnosis. What was Maya like as a child? And once you knew it was the ADHD, right, and you had the benefit of hindsight, what are some of the symptoms that you always out? But once you knew it was ADHD, you were like, duh, it was ADHD.
Yeah, sure. So me as a child, I was very compliant. I did have straight stubbornness, but I generally I would follow the rules and did everything. So I was very good at school. I think I liked the routine and structure, and you need to do this for this outcome. So I wasn't like top of the class or anything, but I it was my preferred environment, I would say. So because of, I suppose, the way school's done, like there's a lot of socialization going on, so it's easy to make friends as a result, because you're sort of, I don't know, forced interaction. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but everyone's there for a purpose. So sometimes my social behaviors, I don't understand a lot of some things that happen. And when, I suppose as a child, when I would ask, I would probably be more shamed and laughed at than no one explained it to me or told me, like, because they thought, oh, you should know that. That's simple, you should get that. So unfortunately, there was a lot of shame growing up.
So was that, Maya, was that going on at home?
Probably more so. So I know my parents did the best they could, and it was a pretty typical 80s, 90s upbringing. So they, had no awareness themselves. So they supported me. Like, I did a million activities and I was always busy after school doing heaps of stuff, and they used to run me around constantly. Obviously.
So ultimately, they did the best they could do given the information they had at the time. But
Correct.
they clearly loved you and they wanted you to succeed and be successful and happy, right?
Yeah. So their version of successful is, doing well at school, going to university and all the rest of it. But I never felt like I fit in, especially with, I suppose, my family, extended family. I just, no one ever got me. No one understood me. So yeah, there was just that, I don't know if it's isolation or whatever else. So I think at school, kids can be mean too, but they can also be very accepting. So they're just like, yeah, that's Maya, that's her quirks, it's fine. Yeah. So I've still got a lot of my good school friends now that we not hang out every day or anything, but we still keep in contact. But yeah, so like even at school, end of school, I sort of got the school medal and the all-rounder medal. So I was obviously excelling there, but there were still things I just never understood. And even in some of my schoolwork, I just never got it. And I never understood why I couldn't get it when everyone else could. But I also worked, a lot harder than anyone else I knew. So
were you messy?
A little bit, not as bad as you would think. I just had a messy corner, I think, more than a whole messy room or anything like that. But I didn't understand how my friends always had all this time to socialize and everything, because I was constantly studying and trying to fit more in and trying to learn more, and trying to do things, I suppose, the right way. And then I suppose I did always surprise myself with my intelligence, and I always surprised people around me. So maybe they just didn't. Yeah, no one really got me. So is
that what motivated you to kind of study so hard and keep working at all of this, because you knew that you got a lot back because of that?
Yeah, and I don't know, just knowing you're different, you like try harder to fit in. So it was one way, because socially I was a bit awkward and whatever else. So I was like, well, if I can do well at school, and it's not that people would like me or anything, it's just more you fit into society and you can do what you want with your life, I suppose, post school and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I did have my grandma was amazing. She was one of my favorite people. So unfortunately she did live in sort of like the Eastern European culture, even though she was in Australia. So she didn't really understand, current society, but she was just a person that always accepted me for who I was. And like we chatted a few times a week and everything. And she just, always just supported me, but differently to everyone else. So we had a pretty amazing relationship.
Is she still around?
No, she did die a few years ago. So, for her, she always wanted to see me get married. So she did see that obviously hasn't worked out, but that's okay.
And that's what they say, right? That with ADHD, you just need one adult who completely believes in you regardless.
Yeah.
And you had that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I suppose I just want to say, like, for the sake of this story, I know we're halfway through, but like, this is my story, so it's my perceived views on everything.
Of course.
So there are people in my life that may not agree with what I've said, and they may have seen it differently. So
you're allowed to have your own story, Maya.
I know, but I just want to say that, like, it's the way it happened in my head, which, like, for me is the truth, but for other people that may not be. So as a result of, I suppose, my continuing therapy journey, so I'm still doing that, I have more recently realised I'm autistic as well, which of course comes as a comorbidity with ADHD. I actually don't mind. I don't mind my autism because I realize there's a rigidity in my thought process. And I think it actually saves me from my impulsivity of my ADHD
Yes.
sometimes.
Yes, because
So,
they're just opposing forces, right? But they kind of
yeah.
keep us in the, I think that in my experience, women who are on both spectrums, and I honestly think it's all part of the same one,
Yeah.
they seem to be able to function and be successful in a traditional way.
Yeah.
It's easier for them, I think,
Yeah.
than
Except
women
for
who are.
some of the social cues we miss. But yeah, besides
Yes,
that.
yes. But it's that push and pull, a complete structure, and you can expect everything, and then that freedom, right?
Yeah.
I don't want anything set in stone.
But I
So
think it does make you look a bit indecisive in some respects because you're like, my ADHD wants me to do everything, and then my autism's like, do you really understand that? I don't think you should do that. I don't think you get what's going on here. So, it can make you look indecisive. So, and also with that, so I have recently, and I don't know whether I like that my psychologist has actually told me because I have PTSD from my marriage and from my childhood, actually. So I think I'm still coming to grips with it. So since it's been validated, a lot of things have come out in my head that do that. So it's more the death by a thousand cuts, the small traumas that,
yes.
and I feel that I had quite a privileged childhood and everything. So I actually feel a bit ashamed over having PTSD over that because I know a lot of your beautiful clients come on with, the most horrific trauma stories from their childhood, and I was loved and I was looked after, and I really struggle in my head to comprehend that I can have trauma and that it exists in me.
The thing about it, though, Maya, is everybody's different, right? What's traumatic to you may not be traumatic to me, but
Yeah.
what's traumatic to you may be really, really traumatic to someone else. So I just don't think we can think that way.
No, well, I mean, I've dealt with all the big trauma in my life pretty well.
Yeah.
But it's the smaller stuff that's sort of getting to me now, and now that it's revalidated, it's things that are said in everyday conversation. Even my kids can trigger me. So, but being aware that my overwhelmed responses sometimes are trauma responses, I can't stop them yet. Like I'm not at a place where I can, but I can acknowledge them and then explain, especially to my children or something, that this is what's happened and this is why mummy did this. And then, so I don't apologize for the behavior anymore, but I do educate people on them, just because it does exist in me and I can't, I'm not sort of healed enough yet to manage that, but it can just be someone saying like, I can't hear you or something, and that'll shut me down because, that's what my dad said. That's what my husband used to say, and I'm like, maybe they just can't hear you, so I need to work through it still a bit more. And there's obviously, now that it's been validated, examples have come, because I don't remember a lot about my childhood, which I thought was ADHD, but might be a bit of trauma too.
Combination of both, right?
Yeah. So,
and I think you're so right. I mean, obviously you can feel however you want to feel. I shouldn't be telling you, that's not helpful, but all of those little cuts can add up to one big trauma. And we see that with ADHD and autism time and time again. So it's your experience.
Yeah. And being undiagnosed, you don't know that you are different, and there's a reason for that difference. And so I'm an advocate for diagnoses because I think it gives people an understanding, at least of themselves. And I know some people choose not to go down being diagnosed. But I think it allows you to understand a bit better with yourself, and especially with kids, like it gives them, they go, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not, I just think differently, and that's fine. Everyone thinks differently, you know?
Yeah. So what else has changed since you were diagnosed?
Literally everything.
Okay. Tell us.
My life has no resemblance to what it did 12 months ago at all. Like externally, probably, same house, same job, everything else, but not within myself. So with my obviously I've separated. I'm not sure whether to talk about my work now or talk about my husband, but that's all right.
Just
I
what you're comfortable talking about.
Yeah. I was doing very poorly at my job as well. So I had a couple of years, well, everything was not working. So people at work sort of didn't, and it's not their place either, but they didn't step up to see what's going on. So rather than, trying to help, they just, they end up putting you on a performance plan and other things, which I wasn't quite on. But I was getting a lot of feedback and, a lot of micromanagement about what I was doing and how I was doing it. So I, again, thought, oh, ADHD, use that as an excuse. Oh, yeah, cool. That's the, the task initiation, the completing of tasks and whatever else. So I
asked you at work, did you tell them I've been diagnosed with ADHD?
So I ended up, no, I haven't told everyone, so my managers still don't know. They say they're inclusive. I don't totally agree with that, but again, that might be my perception as well. So I was lucky enough to have a lady come in who I used to work with as my senior, and she's been diagnosed with MS a couple of years before, and she had a sort of a rough time at work around that diagnosis because that changed. You have brain fog and other things that do change the way that you can focus. And I didn't know what was going on at that stage either, but she just went, okay, Maya used to work with me. She used to be a good worker. She did really well. And now she's not. I'll give her a clean slate and we'll work out what's going on, because obviously something's going on in her life. So I got the ADHD diagnosis. I was like, I confided in her about that. And then I work at a mine site. So we have drug tests. So stimulants show up in drug tests. So someone did need to know for that purpose anyway. So then she was the only person I told initially. And that worked for a while. But then the interesting thing was, once I went further with my husband, I'm now the understanding that the control was worse for my work than what the ADHD was. So my husband.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean?
Well, my husband's an engineer and I'm an engineer and I work with engineers. So my husband sort of devalued me to a point where I saw no value in myself whatsoever. So I thought, oh, he thinks I'm, stupid and unintelligent. I don't have anything to add. I work with engineers. Why would they want to know what I have to add either? So even if I did work, I didn't think it was good enough. I didn't hand it in. So of course you're always in trouble for not completing tasks and things like that. And a lot of things like that I didn't have the confidence, and I couldn't advocate for myself because I was so devalued. So this senior coming in and actually advocate, well, as an adult, we shouldn't need an advocate, right? But as an adult, I did. And so she came in and she's like, because I was fighting with my managers about taking leave, about doing this, about like everything was a fight for me, everything. And they were challenging me on everything. Whereas she came in and was like, give Mary a leave, let's do this, let's do that, let's work this out. And she didn't even help, like, I say that much, she helped me immensely, but like the time that she put in wasn't that much. It was just a different approach. And so with that, it changed my work life. And then so the realization now is because I can pretty much do my job again now. I'm not like, I do struggle with documentation and things like that you would expect ADHD people to struggle with. But I'm very good at my job practically. So now, and it's more the control, because it's still like, oh, people won't think this is good enough, or people, people don't want to hear what I have to say. So I never spoke up. I never said anything in meetings. I just became a shell of myself. I was just existing.
But that's because you didn't think that anything you had to say was worth hearing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And anything I did was not worth anyone's time. So, and it seems stupid that, of course, like, that you don't do work instead of doing bad work. I don't understand that. But yeah, for some reason I did my work and I never handed it in because it was never good enough and everyone else was better than me and could do a better job.
That sounds like learned helplessness, right? Which is what many women with ADHD struggle with.
Yeah.
Like, why even bother? Nobody's going to like it. It's going to be wrong. So we just give up before we even try.
And it's quite challenging as well when you're actually trying to do things the right way too, and then it still can't achieve your goals, sort of thing. So at work, I'm not really open about my neurodiversity, but I'm open about the coercive control, because I can see that how it can happen with bosses and managers and things like that to workers. The relationship doesn't need to be intimate. It can be with anyone, really, and people can have that control over you, and you might not even know it or realize it. So for me, the work one was huge, because I probably, if it continued, I would have lost my job. And I forgot that I liked my work, and now I remember that I do again. So I can see areas that I add more value, but at the moment, I do need to get better at my job to then probably think about moving on and doing something different, because I do like the psycho safety sort of aspects of work and things like that, obviously with coercive control and all that stuff. So it's been an interesting journey, that's for sure.
So my question for how did your husband respond on diagnoses?
Okay, so this is a good one, and probably one that definitely caused a red flag. So like I said, I was a bit scared to tell him initially, and then I went, okay, well, this explains a lot of things, so I'll sit down and tell him. And I just wanted a hug, and then he said, "You've been emotionally unavailable, so why would I be emotionally available to you now?" And that was pretty much the end of the conversation. So of course it made me sad, and I thought, okay, that's a bit weird. That's a very odd reaction. And I didn't really understand or comprehend that. So
did he, not like it's a religion or something, and I'm using air quotes, but did he believe in ADHD, or he just thought it was a bunch of hooey?
So no, he doesn't believe in ADHD at all. So that came up later. So my middle child has ADHD and more recently autism, and he's the most amazing little kid, and he's probably my easiest child. And we had a joint session with his psychologist where my husband told me in front of me that ADHD didn't exist and it's not a thing, and people just think differently. And that, so he doesn't believe it. He doesn't believe it in my son either. So he's sort of not allowing, he doesn't agree with early intervention and things like that, unfortunately. And when I live it, it makes it very challenging for me to, sort of excuse that behavior. But so no, he doesn't believe in it. I don't think he really believes in autism either. Like, there's just a thing.
I am curious. Before you got married,
mm-hmm.
What was he like? Did you know this probably wasn't like you just had this inkling that I shouldn't be getting married to this person?
So, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because like I've said, I think numerous times already, that I knew I was different. I knew I was quirky. I knew I didn't fit in. I knew I was, that things just were different for me. So I didn't really have a lot of probably intimate relationships before meeting him. My psychologist may have said I was a bit inexperienced. So and most boys weren't really interested in me when I was young. So, so probably didn't really have that opportunity. So he's probably the first person that sort of, I suppose, openly loved me and everything else. So he had, I had my quirks, which I knew about. He had his quirks, so I sort of went, well, I'm quite accepting. So, I'm different. He's different. He seems to like me, so it's okay. He's essentially a workaholic, so he does like work. We're both in mining, so it worked well. We're both together. There are things like he does like to drink. He doesn't drink very often, but when he does, sometimes the consequences can be quite dire. So a lot of people, I suppose, didn't like that side of him, but I was sort of like, oh, he'll, I don't know, grow out of it or something. We're all when we met, we were all young and we did go out a little bit and all that sort of stuff. But sort of as you get older, that behavior gets less or less acceptable, I suppose.
But Maya, were there red flags from the beginning and you just chose to, I'm not going to look at them. I'm not going to look at them.
I don't know. Well, there was definitely like some things like, yeah, okay, I'll say yes. Yeah, hindsight's a great thing. So I mean, I always did more around the house, but that's something that, you know, my mum always did more than my dad did, and my dad did other things. So I was sort of brought up that was, you know, women's job, I suppose, a little bit.
Women's work.
Yeah. So I always did more. You know, there was an element like when he was working hard, he'd ignore me and things like that, which I just thought, oh, you know, he's concentrating on other things and whatever else. And then, you know, I probably we were financially both contributing, but, you know, I was always the one paying the bills and stuff. I have all the marital debt and things like that, and he doesn't like debt, and he would never give me money that he earned. So even to pay for cars and things that I couldn't really afford at the time.
Which is financial abuse.
Yeah, it's financial control. That's correct. So that's why I'm glad I still have my job and I have my access to my money that I make. Yeah, so there was things like that, but you sort of go, oh, we're both together, so I know we both have money, doesn't matter that much. And then
everybody has quirks.
Yeah, he just likes that. And so I actually chose to keep my money separate the whole time, which is maybe, I don't know, you know, something that should have been a red flag. And then I do remember saying, like, because I used to say, oh, I do all the housework. And then it was very subtle, oh, don't talk about the relationship. You shouldn't talk about us. Why are you talking about, you know, what I do? And there was a few things like that that sort of snuck in. So then you get trained to not speak about your relationship, which is why people don't know the position you're in, because you're not communicating with anybody about it.
Because it's all about control, right? He wants to be able to control you and any dialogue that gets out there.
Yeah, so it definitely wasn't what it is now. So it was, you know, there was good times, and we had a lot of fun, and it wasn't too bad probably until the last few years. And he did get a new job where he works fly in, fly out. So I think they're a bit more narcissistic in their culture there too. So it probably breeds, and maybe it's an environment he likes, but it's sort of, even our mutual friends have sort of said it has gotten worse over time, and they've seen the change in him as well. So yeah, there was definitely elements there. You know,
can I ask you, you talked about these, like, I don't know, home duties and probably child duties that come with, you know, having a family.
Yep.
You're both mining engineers. You're both making, I guess, somewhere close to the same amount of money, and probably
no. He's a lot. He's moved up. I've had kids and taken time off.
Okay.
And he's a lot higher
so
than I am.
Done the kid stuff. He's been able to work more hours, but the only reason he's been able to work more hours is because it sounds like you've taken on all the house stuff. So why does he think that if you guys are both mining engineers, all of that is your responsibility and he can just kind of go do what he wants to do?
Well, it's interesting now during separation because he doesn't think I'm entitled to the finances because he's earned them, and he does not understand the non-financial contributions to the family, or the fact that he walks out the door, you know, for a month at a time, and that leaves maybe the kids. But even by the end of our marriage, to be honest, he did nothing. So the only contribution he had was taking the kids, dropping them off at school and picking them up and taking them to activities. So he didn't contribute with any of the housework, and then he'd just say, oh, it's your mess, I choose to live in it. And then when I'd ask for help with, you know, washing or dishes, it'd come back on me again that I created all this mess and it was my responsibility to clean it up because I created all the clothes that my kids wear and, you know, are dirty. And then I'd use too many pots and pans to do cooking, so it's my fault again that there were more than there should have been or whatever else. So he, everything was on me to try and do more. Like I got to the point I don't sit down, I don't relax, I don't have time to watch Netflix. I have none of that. Like I am literally running around. And that's where I realized like he's sitting down watching reruns of some crap and I'm doing everything. And he would have seen me, right? Like, how can you not? And then he actually tell me off for not having time for him. And I'm like, no, I don't actually think I do have time for you right now because I'm doing everything. So no, I don't.
And you're being such an asshole. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And
no
then of
time
course
for
there's
you.
that element that you subconsciously you probably don't want to be there either. So and of course even with when he does help out with running with the kids around and stuff, I'm still doing all the calendar in the background, making sure they've got everything they need for the day, packing lunches, doing all that stuff. So whilst he's literally running kids, the executive functions are all still with me. So sort of, I suppose post-diagnosis, I didn't leave straight away, but I started to have conversations around, well, I've got ADHD, I can't organize things as well as maybe you can. You're good at these things, you should start helping, you should do this, you should do that. And he just said no. He said, no, not helping. It's my rest. I'm not contributing at all. And I was like, hang on, like I shouldn't need to do all of this. And then there was other things. So I did bring up like sort of his drinking and stuff. And I said, like that's something I don't like, that maybe we should discuss that you do. And then he started changing the stories around some of his drinking because he did used to work with me.
You? It's your
Yeah.
fault?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. That's what was starting to happen. So he used to work with me and he lost his job for outside of work incident, but it was with work people when my kids were 2 and 8 months old and I had to go back to work full time. And at the time I knew it wasn't my fault and I asked him to get help and assistance and that was the only way we're moving forward. And he said that he did, which he didn't. He recently told me he didn't. So then the story became that he didn't want to be at work anyway and it was all crap and everything was going on. And I'm like, hang on, what? No, you lost your job. Like, it wasn't a choice. You lost your job. And then it was like, oh, you don't love me enough, all these other things that, that's why I drink and all these other things. So the thing with, I suppose, controlling relationships, people probably don't understand because you don't know why you're in it, you don't know why you stay. So they convince you that they love you so much that it's sort of your problem that you don't love them as much. So like you're told all the time that they love you. Like so in theory you should feel love. You don't really, but they constantly tell you, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, and
but it's always words. They don't show you in action.
No, that's right. But then you're convinced that you're the one not doing enough to show them because they love you and like why don't I love them as much back or why can't I do as much, So once I started asking him to step up and do things and I was met with a lot of literally just no. I actually went, and I don't agree with the timing that I got the award because I don't think I deserved it that year, but I got an industry award through.
Of course you deserved it that year.
Not that year, no. I needed it and it was the right timing, but I wasn't contributing, as I said, in my life as much as I should have been. So I ended up getting an award for my mining industry. And I went to the conference.
You deserved it.
Thank you. And I realized that at the conference, I could talk to CEOs, I could talk to board members, I could talk to all these really high people in business and like in mining. And I had no issues there. I never felt stupid. They never, like the conversations weren't one-sided, like I was contributing and everything. And I had to get up to give a speech. And I don't think I quite realized, I suppose, how prestigious the award was at the time either, which is a bit of a shame, but that's okay. And I looked around and I saw hundreds of people just supporting me. And I was like, how can I have more support at an annual conference than I can have at home? Like, this is ridiculous.
Among people you don't even, a lot of them.
Yeah, for people I don't really know, but they're just, and they were they're just yeah. And so I actually went home after that conference, and that's when I chose to separate. So I I separated. Well, of course he told me to get out at 10 o'clock at night, which I didn't. But
So talk to us about, okay, let's say there is a woman listening right now. She has ADHD and she's struggling with something similar.
Yeah.
What is your advice to her? Because clearly, from what you're telling us, you are so much happier that you got the diagnoses. It brought about an awareness. And that is then what motivated you to start seeing what was really going on and make some really big changes for yourself.
Yeah. So I would say, because I never had any threat of physical abuse or anything like that, which I know a lot of people under control, and coercive control is the first level sort of into that. So it doesn't matter what type of control, because unfortunately separation's bad for everyone, divorce is bad for everyone. It's a trauma event. So people can change, and people do change. So I would ensure that you are adequately set up so that you don't have to go back. Like there's no option that you have to return, especially if it's a physically abusive relationship. So I still myself made sure that I had all the important documents from myself and the kids' birth certificates, passports and everything else. I made sure that I had access to money that he could not access the money that I do have. It's all on redraw. I should have actual money, but that's okay. I can live with that. And then, just to make sure that if you need to limit that, so just get everything in line first. So that's what I did before I actually separated. I actually went through, talked to the bank. I talked to, we have a separation place in town. I went and had a meeting with them about what I should do. And they're like, what, you're not separated yet? And you come to see us? I'm like, yeah, I just want to understand what my options are. So I would personally make sure all that's done and then have the conversation. To be honest, I'm actually glad that my husband didn't fight, because if he fought for me, I probably would have stayed, and I probably would have come up to a similar situation maybe in a few years. I'm not sure, but the fact that he didn't fight for me is actually better for me. But see, this is the interesting part too, because I said I was leaving. We did have a family holiday booked for the next month, which was booked like 12 months in advance. We're both pretty stubborn, so we both still went on it. We just didn't talk to each other, but because we didn't talk to each other, he thought we were fine. So
that sounds pleasant.
It was still okay, but it was sort of what we'd become in our marriage a little bit, that we didn't talk anyway. So it wasn't much. It wasn't dissimilar to what we actually had. So he just thought we're fine because we went on this holiday together. And then I said, sort of 4 months later, I go, I'm going to get started on the financial part of our separation and stuff. And he was like, he didn't even have the respect to believe that I was leaving. Like, he didn't believe me that I would leave. And so he just thought, oh, she's just talking crap, she's going to come back. And the other thing with that was, it took me 4 months to realize that I started thinking differently and that the control was even there. So I didn't even realize when I left that I was under control. It was when I started thinking differently, when I was out of the control, that I even started to comprehend that it was there. Because when it's still now, when a health professional looks at me, or I tell my story and people go, oh, domestic violence or coercive control, I go, is it? Like, I still can't quite get it. It's not quite there in my head. And I go, but he never physically hurt me, all that sort of stuff. And you're like, all these other things that I suppose, so for me, I had no idea. I had zero idea the control I was under. And it's only now, and his behavior post separation that goes, okay, he thinks he was under control, because a lot of things have happened that are like, you're just trying to regain.
You had control. To get out to be able to see how unhealthy that relationship was that you were in, and how much you were under someone's control. I mean, you made a comment about when you went to go explain to him, oh, I was diagnosed with ADHD. You actually had fear around that. You were scared to tell him.
Yeah. Yeah, so it is. Yeah, so I had no idea, and that's the scariest part for me, the fact I didn't know. And then you say to people, oh, I got so afraid. They're like, oh, he was never good enough for you, or we could see something. And I'm like, why did no one tell you? Like, why does no one step up and go, you're acting different? Because it's more planting the seed, right? It's not like you have to tell someone to leave their husband. Like, I would never endorse doing that. But it's like, are you okay with this situation? Because I know, Tracy, you talk about your husband has control of your finances and you're okay with that. I was not okay with that, but it's just what became, part of my marriage. And I knew if I ever left that the financial control would be like, and financial security would be an issue for me.
Yeah.
But over a long time, that's what happened. And I can't change it now until, we actually
And I should also say that he's got control of the finances, meaning he does all the work. But if at any point I want to go spend money or I want to get into an account and take out money, it's like, yeah. I mean, we have enough respect for each other that if it's over a certain, like, I would say if it's, I don't know, maybe over $1,000, I would mention it to him, just like he would probably mention it to me. If it's for something personal, if it's for something for the kids or whatever, no. And I think that's the difference, right? It's the control versus I feel like I'm getting away scot-free, that he's doing all the numbers and the paying all the bills.
Yeah, so like,
you're right.
I pay all he paid the mortgages and stuff, but I paid all the day-to-day bills. And then it was always comments around, why doesn't your wage cover our cost of living and all these other things? And I'm like, because I work part-time and other things like that.
So you know what your is? It almost sounded like with your relationship, you and him, there was no positive emotion. Every encounter, or like it was just all negative emotion. There was no team.
No, it wasn't like that initially, but obviously, like, as life got busier with kids and stuff, and see, he would just stop doing things. So then I'd pick up more and more. And of course, it was my fault. And so I ended up, it's more of, I suppose there's another version of learned helplessness, right? Like, it's not that you're not doing anything, you're doing everything because you don't know what else to do because no one else is doing it. And kids aren't old enough to contribute or help, and there's 2 adults in the house and the other one's literally doing, like, because he's like, just don't do it. And you're like, but if I don't do it, no one's going to do it. Like, it doesn't work, somebody needs to. And you can't outsource like everything, everything day to day, especially when someone's just sitting there doing nothing. I don't understand why they can't put on a load of washing.
Why do we need to hire someone, right? You can get off your butt away from the television and you can help.
Yeah. So no, there wasn't. No, there was not.
Okay, but talk to us about, you said, okay, it was not like this at the beginning. Yet were there, and I asked, and I thought you said yes, but weren't there signs that, I mean, did you feel that with Ben, he loved and appreciated you for who you are, of anything else? And he was going to have your back. Was that at the beginning?
Probably,
was it like
no, probably not. I would probably say that I did settle a little bit because, like I said, I hadn't had much experience. People always weren't interested in me, and I was like, well, this is it. I suppose a progressive thing. You have a relationship, you get married, you have kids, sort of thing. He always wanted kids. He seemed like he'd be a good dad. So, and like, when he is present, and that's his choice when he's present, unfortunately, when he is present, he is a good dad, but he chooses not to be present a lot and on devices and other things as well. So even when he's there, he wasn't there anymore. By the end, he was just sitting on his, phone playing chess or something. And you're like, really, your kids are right in front of you. You don't get a lot of time with them. You work away. Can you interact with them and everything else? So even now, post separation, he bought them all switches, so they all sit on the couch together when he's looking after them, and they sit there and do that instead. But so like, there was always things about, I said my grandma's my favorite person, but one thing that really sticks with me that she said is, marriage is hard, relationships are hard, you've got to work at it. And so I probably had more that attitude that, like, everyone has these issues. And the thing that really gets me is it's probably similar in America, but in Australian society, everyone complains about that their, spouses or husbands specifically, sorry, don't do enough, they don't help enough with the housework, they don't help enough with this, they don't do this, they don't do that, they don't. And so when I hear that in conversation, I'm like, well, okay, my husband doesn't help either. So, like it's pretty common.
This is normal.
Husbands not to help, so that's okay. The difference that I didn't realize probably till recently is that, their husbands or spouse give them like emotional support, which is not what I had. I didn't have any emotional support. So even if, their husbands are breadwinners, work more, do all that stuff, and it's a choice for them, and they've chosen to allocate, the housework to the woman, and the money earning to the man, but that's more of a choice for me. It wasn't a choice. Everything was forced upon me. So it's just like, well, you're not, and it wasn't like I wasn't told, but then when no one else does anything around the house, you're the only one, you have to do it, so
the thing is, I think it's always hoisted upon us. I don't think it's a choice. If you're socialized to believe that this is work, and then also go out and get a career, you're what not blackmailed, what's the word, brainwashed. How can a woman do all of this? A woman with ADHD, right? Our executive functions tend to be the problem, and so then you want to give that all to us?
So he's much better at cleaning and things than I am, so it did annoy me a bit, but anyway. So
how do you think all of this, though, how did ADHD play even more all of this, and or did it also, was it easier for you to get sucked into this because of ADHD, do you think?
Undiagnosed, I would say 100% yes, because I already had, and I would never openly, like I'm a very positive person. I do see the good side of almost everything, which is why even through all this, I actually didn't have depression. I was just trying harder to do everything better. And then I realized maybe the problem isn't me. So the undiagnosed part of being different, but I was never allowed to be different, I suppose, when I was young. So my ability to mask is like second to none. And I can see that in my second child as well. His ability to mask is phenomenal. No one at school would ever pick him up as ADHD. They wouldn't pick him up as autistic, anything. So, our ability to and that's where I think it's actually maybe even better than neurotypical people, our ability to learn social behaviors and social cues. We should get an acting award, I think, because we are pretty good at it, even if we don't understand what's going on in our heads. And as a result of that, what you see externally is not the same that's going on internally. So whilst you may present as essentially normal in every respect, internally, you're not, and you just don't get it. And so, knowing I was always different, not understanding what that different meant, and not having, I suppose, the right role models maybe for social interactions and things like that, and setting precedent, and people not stepping up and saying, oh, are you sure this relationship is right for you? Or, do you know what you're doing? Or this isn't the way other people operate. Because for me, everything is learned. So when people say this happens to them, I'm like, okay, well, that happens to me too. So I can tick that box, that's fine. So I don't have that intuition, I suppose, with social interactions to know things can be different all the time. So I think I'm a lot more accepting of what happens, because I think people are nice as well, and people will be nice to you. And I don't I've been trying to convince myself ever since I left that he didn't understand the situation I was in, and he didn't understand the control. And I still like to think that. But then his behavior posts has sort of made me think, maybe, he was in a good position, right? He was doing nothing. He had 3 beautiful kids. He had, outwardly, you got this beautiful family. And he didn't have to do any work for it. So, I can understand why for him it was probably, and he doesn't seem to mind that we weren't interacting well, that that we weren't communicating. He didn't really care about that side of things either. So,
is it that if you feel like from the time you're little, something's wrong with you, that you're not going to even get any better. So you should just settle and accept what you get because you're lucky to get that.
Yeah. And I think if you have good role models and good people in your life, and, you know, very like, because you don't need a diagnosis to be accepted, right? So if you think differently, you can have the most amazing parents that are just like, yeah, cool, all right, that's fine, you know, like, and as long as they validate you for yourself and your thinking is okay, I think you'll be fine. And then if they, you know, like, oh, those friends, maybe are they okay? Like, you know, and they teach you something around that. Like, I think you would excel in life, to be honest. But being always knowing you're on the back foot, always people questioning, like, oh, you're intelligent, but you don't seem to get everything. Like, what's going on with you? Why are you, you know, and like you said, am I messy? So later in life, I probably am a bit messier, you know, so then people come over to your house and they judge you for stuff and things being everywhere, and you're successful, you should be able to clean this up. And it's like, well, actually, I can't organize things. I really struggle with that. And it's that constant. And when when it's because when people don't know you different and you don't know you different, it can only be you, right? So you're the issue, you're the problem. Everything's on you. So even if that social interaction neurotypically was a bit crap too, like someone, I don't know, didn't want to be your friend or something, as a neurodiverse person, there's less understanding in it anyway. And you go, because you're very logical, and you go, but I did this and this happened, so why did this person then move away? And I think sometimes you just need that closure or that discussion through like other people, and then they give a different perspective and you go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like, it's only recently that a friend said to me, you probably stayed in your marriage for as long as you did because your parents married, your grandparents married, everyone in my family stays in their marriages. So, you know, they've had tough times, and you see with your own parents, it's not always the best relationship that they have, but yet they stick it through. So you're like, well, if they can do it, maybe that's what it's meant to be.
This is what marriage is about, right?
Yeah.
Like, you just have this understanding that, oh, all marriages are like this.
Yeah.
You don't realize that there's a whole pasture out there of really happy marriages where the couples are really supportive, and, you know, you feel like you've got a cheerleader. And I also think that when you start out and you're young and you feel like you don't fit in, even in your own family, that's trauma. And so what ends up happening is you never feel safe, but the not to feel safe. So you find a partner that also makes you feel not particularly safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's comfortable to you, because it's what you know.
Yeah, and that's where trauma plays a big part, because now that people listen to me and I actually have asked people, what are you doing? And they go, I'm listening to you. And I'm like, oh, because probably by the end of my marriage, I couldn't even really say a full sentence without it coming back on me for anything. So there was no listening, comprehending, understanding from my side. Yeah, but now, and because I love that challenge. I love talking to people. So I'm probably not good in a group, but, you know, one-on-one, I absolutely love it. So I will talk to whoever will listen now about neurodiversity and control and things like that. But I've found, like, over the last 12 months, it's been the best conversations of my life. And, you know, no one's talking to me about the weather or anything. Like, it's really engaging. And I've only found literally maybe one person that you go, okay, you don't want to discuss this, whereas majority of people are like, yeah, all right, wow, that's a really interesting perspective, I didn't know about this. And
how are your kids doing?
So my kids are
do you have any girls, by the way, or is it just
I have a little daughter. So I have
that's great.
I'll start with my eldest son. So this isn't another element as well, which is I didn't see either till recently. So my eldest son is very, very neurotypical. So he is very intelligent. He is a sponge though. So he does, you know, take on sort of everything around him. So, you know, he's pretty good at school. He's got friends. He does well at most things. But I have always butted heads with him. I've always had a few issues trying to talk to him. And it was only very, very recently that I realized he sounds like his dad. So I have an 8-year-old who uses his intelligence and his quick wit to put people down subtly in conversations. Yep. And I may have called him a narcissist to his teacher, but I know that's not the right term for an 8-year-old. But yeah, it's like my psychologist said, it's the only behavior he's seen in his life. Well, obviously he has friends, but it's the main behavior he's seen modeled by dad. And he thinks it's okay to talk to people that way, and he thinks that that's acceptable social behavior.
He saw talk to his mom that way, so then he thinks, oh, I can talk to her that way too, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
be disrespectful
and so it's very subtle. It's not like obvious. It's not like they're name calling. It's not anything like that at all. It's just this. Yeah, and because he's very quick like his dad, isn't he? Like very quick, very intelligent, and so he can put people down very easily, which is not what he should do. Thankfully, he has empathy. Thankfully, majority of his good friends have ADHD, so he can't ignore the fact that ADHD exists. And he's actually very helpful to a lot of his friends with disabilities and things like that. So he'll grow up in a very different environment. And now recently with separation, so my kids actually do talk very openly to me, which I'm very happy about. And he sort of said, oh, Mum, Dad's actually meaner and angrier than you. And I'm like, well, I'm glad both your parents are mean and angry. That's great. But, yeah, so he's starting to see those signs, and he's like, Dad doesn't ask please and thank you when he gets to do things, because, a little bit of that control is now coming out in the kids, obviously, because I'm not there anymore, and things like that. So he will grow and develop, and he has already in the separation, because he was essentially modeling those behaviors that he saw, and I, as a parent, would absolutely be distraught if he did this to any person in his life. So I need to educate him differently about how to speak to people. But I can't have those trauma responses either that I have with Dad, where I get angry or overwhelmed and irritated. So there's a bit of a balancing act there for me as well. But I'm trying to best.
What about the second
so
kid?
my beautiful second boy, he is so the minute I got my diagnosis, I went, I know what's going on with you, mate. So I got him. So he got that inattentive ADHD diagnosis. So essentially he presents like most women would. So he's very quiet, but he's very much in his own head. He has had some issues with like meltdowns and stuff. So and the more we talk about the ADHD and the more we're open about that, autism's definitely present as well, and that's become come out more. And he is he's the most easiest little boy, besides obviously when he gets overwhelmed and has a meltdown. But
is he happier? Does it feel like
so he post diagnosis he's definitely happier, like. And I seem to have a lot of neurodiverse friends, go figure. It's what happens, right? The people you keep in your lives. And so like one time he's like, Mum, I've got music in my head and I can't go to sleep. And I go, oh, I don't have music in my head, but my friend does. My friend Beck, let's ring her. So we rang her and she's talking him through, I hear music all the time. And he hung up the phone. He goes, Mum, there's more of us. And I'm like,
that's all they need to hear, right?
And so he's starting to get better now with sort of the overwhelm moment. He used to hurt me quite a bit earlier this year. Now he's starting to just need his own space, and he can talk it through a bit better. So when I get overwhelmed and I apologize, he says the most beautiful things, and he goes, oh, Mum, but you've only just known you've got ADHD too, so you need to get used to it, and you need to find ways to manage yourself too. And I'm like, oh, thanks, mate. That's beautiful. So his thought process is quite different. He's very intelligent, but he's not standard. He always has friends. So in Australia, we play a lot of ball sports, soccer, cricket, everything else. He's always had, very good hand-eye coordination. So as a result, in Australian society as a white male, you'll essentially always have friends if you are good at sports. So he's got that going for him, and he's never not without a friend. He just has a small friends group, which is fine. That's all you need in life. You just need a couple friends. Unfortunately for him, he's the one that's going to suffer most through the separation. So he says things like, Dad doesn't like the way my brain works. Dad doesn't like me. I get in trouble more with Dad, all that stuff. And he has so much he already has negative self-talk, but then it, comes up about Dad. So he masks so heavily around Dad that Dad doesn't know his true son in any respect at all. Because he's not the version of himself that he is with, well, he's only that version with me anyway. But, and he doesn't accept the meltdowns. He doesn't accept that things might need to be done differently, that he is a different person to the elder son. And so
but is he, I mean, the fact of the matter though is you are that adult in his life, right, who's always talking strengths and talking him up as far as the things he's amazing at.
Yeah. So he's got me, he'll be fine, but it's just unfortunate that my husband can't see that, like, he needs to change for that relationship to be different. Because there's nothing on my son, like, he's 6 years old. He needs to learn strategies, and even like the interventions and stuff. My husband's like, no, I'm not paying for any of them. If you want to do them, they're on you. And I'm like, he needs things. And like the other, like buying.
So is your son doing better though?
Amazingly better. So since he was a bit like me, I think. He got his diagnosis. He's like, oh, cool. It's okay to be different. I am different. Awesome. And so he still masks at school and, in those social situations and everything else. But at home, he's very neurodiverse now and, very different, which is fine. And what he says and what he talks about is very different to the other children. Even like in relation, he asked me a lot of times when I'm going to die, when he's going to die, how we're going to find each other again, and a lot of other things like that, which I don't find neurotypical people think about as much. And he's been asking me recently, so can I be undiagnosed for these? Like, does it go away? How do and so the questions are all valid. They're just very different to the way I think my other kids think, for sure. And
so what about your daughter?
My daughter is the most beautiful little girl, and she is the most resilient kid you'll ever meet. And I probably think that she's the one that I worry about the least in this situation, because she's going to be the one that, holds Dad to account, and me too, for that matter. Tells it like it is. And she's not going to take crap from anybody, because she's just powerful and strong. And so far that I can tell, very neurotypical too. I can't see a lot of traits of anything sort of creeping in yet, but I know girls can be different. But, her social cues, even from being a baby, she was very, very switched on from a few months old about what was going on socially. So yeah, she's still not at school yet or anything, but it has a few friends, which is, like I said, what you need. And
I think the beauty of all of this is that you're her most important role model, right?
Yeah,
because you're the same-sex parent.
Well, that's where I needed to do things differently, because if I'd continued on that pathway, I was starting to shame my kids and do things like, even when you're late for something or something happens, you're like, bloody kids, like, you just never can get out the door and all that stuff. And that's not what I wanted for my children, because it's rarely their fault, but they're an easy excuse. And that's what I realized I was starting to do. And that's the easy way to, deflect blame off yourself, I suppose, as well. So now that I'm doing better, they're doing better, and they're thriving, and they speaking up, and our relationship's better, and we talk about everything. We talk, we're very open and honest about everything. So we'll talk about our emotions and what's happened. And even, like I said, now with me, when I have a meltdown or something doesn't go my way or something happens, I'm not too big to stand up and say, I'm sorry, I did that. That was not appropriate. And my kids will hold me to account and say, Mum, that wasn't fair. Like, you shouldn't have done that either. And I'll be like, yeah, you're right, actually. I apologize. So we're working through it all together. We're a very chaotic family, let's say. But my kids have always been beautiful.
I love chaos. So, so if we can wrap this up, And I would love for you to speak for 1 minute to a woman who is listening to this episode and is in a similar situation that you were in.
Mhm.
What would you have to say to her?
So I would say that the options are out there. There's better things. Separation and divorce isn't easy for anybody. It is, and it's not what I wanted for my family or my children, but sometimes it is actually the right thing to do, and they can benefit from that. It doesn't need to be a trauma in their lives. Yeah, make sure you have the systems in place. I have an amazing support network of friends that actually assist me through this, because you do need that help, especially when that person's controlling. They'll come back and they'll try and regain that control. So you need to be strong enough to know that and be okay and move forward, and then work on yourself. So in that respect, if I know it's a bit of a privileged thing, if you have money, go do the therapies. I would not be in the position I'm in 12 months later if I'd not had professional assistance. Talking to friends is amazing and good, but they're limited by what they know and their perspectives. So yeah, look after yourself first. If you look after yourself, everything else will follow.
That's so true. And so would you say it's the best decision you've made?
Yeah, obviously I probably could have made a better decision not to, engage in the relationship initially, but I
But you have
personally
the 3
believe,
kids from it, right?
and they're amazing. So but at the same time, I can't see why I would suffer all this trauma if it wasn't to share my experience and educate people, because otherwise, it's a pretty depressing place to be in. So, for me, my management of trauma, I suppose, is educating other people, and the amount of people, because I now speak up at work things and in other situations, and I get so much feedback, and so many people come out and say thank you so much for sharing your stories. And it's like I said, you would never tell someone to leave their husband, but if you're talking about it and these people are like, oh, hang on, is that my situation, is that something I'm in, then they may consider looking into it further and doing something different. And if one person, 2 people maybe puts that question in their head, they might consider other options. And like I said, it's not ideal, but unfortunately sometimes it's the best thing.
Said that it just reminded me of this conversation I was having with my editor. You just said, I can't advise, I'm not going to tell people to just go leave their spouse. And I had the same conversation with my editor. She's like, because that's what I said. And I have to tell you, when I have women go through my AOK program, the other day someone asked me, I think we were in the big Facebook group, and someone asked me about that. And like, what am I most proud of? Like, are there experiences that I remember? And I said, you know what I actually remember better than anything is, frankly, and I'm proud of this, is the number of women that have gone through my AOK program and then ended up marriages or their partnerships. And, the woman who was interviewing me, and I'm like, yeah, because that shows that wasn't a right fit for them. And by going through AOK, they discovered who they really were and their worth, and that they need to start listening to their own intuition, because they are the best expert on their life they will ever have. And so I had this conversation with my editor, and she reworded it. And I really liked the way she said it, because she didn't say just leave them. But this is
the problem is that you lose that intuition, or you lose that you think your intuition's wrong.
Right, exactly. You second guess it all. So this is what she said. She said, actually, this is how she reworded it. Well, she didn't really, it was more the last sentence that she did. Some women ask me what to do if their partner refuses to learn about ADHD or believes the condition doesn't exist or is just an excuse. Tell them what I'll share with you now. Continue to learn about ADHD and work on yourself, regardless of what your partner will or won't do or what they believe. Focus on your strengths, values, and what generates positive emotion for you. Over Your partner may begin to see a positive change in you and want to learn more about ADHD. If
Yeah.
this doesn't happen, remember what we all deserve. Remember, we all deserve relationships in which we feel loved and accepted and have the space to be who we really are. So that last sentence, how she wove it in there, I really like that because it was basically saying it without saying it.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that my husband learns through my child actually, and he sees the positive changes in my child, and then realizes that our son with ADHD, that the things can be done differently, because that I don't see any, like, if there's room for change, I get it, stick with it, but there was zero evidence that anything would change in my situation. So I did choose, and it's one of those things that you go, is it worth putting the effort in? Like, is it worth trying to educate this person? They don't want to be educated. So
you
no,
can't.
and I have educated a lot of people, but some people, it's not worth your effort, and it's just going to drag you down.
Okay. So Maya, where can people find you if they'd like to connect with you?
So I have provided you with my email, maya.n.1983.
Okay. And just so our audience knows, we're just using your first and is this your middle name, Maya Ann?
Yeah, that's right.
We're using your first and middle name because, and not a last name, just, to keep things as private as possible. So what I have is maya.ann.1983@gmail.com.
Correct. So just on that, I'm still going through separation, and I am just an ordinary person that listens to Tracy. I'm not a professional of any type, so I can't really provide you with any knowledge on psychology or anything like that. But I'm just here because I've been through it.
Yeah, you're the best kind of expert. You've lived it, right?
Can I just give one? I just want to give, because I was thinking about my ADHD workaround forever. Obviously I exercise, I have, routine structure and everything else. But the recent one I've realized is, and I think it's way, way more important for neurodiverse people, because obviously no one should be around toxic people. But the thing that I've come to be aware of is that if I'm around like sort of negative people in any respect, and like you said, it can be work and it can be home, I start to mirror and reflect their behaviors. And my psychologist thinks it's mainly because there's, my masking and my trauma. And I think a lot of neurodiverse people and women will do that. So if you are actually, working with someone who's really toxic, or have a partner in that space, it's likely you're going to take on some of those negative traits that they have, and you're not even going to be aware of it. And so I've actually chosen to work less with certain people that are likely to do that, and to associate less with people in my life that will bring that out in me, because it's on a subconscious level for me. So I don't even know that I'm doing it, and I don't know that it's affecting me, because it's just a part I've masked for 39 years, and then obviously that trauma response has probably been there about the same time. So try what you can to make sure you have really good people in your life. And that'd be my biggest ADHD weapon, and that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Okay, that sounds like a brilliant one, Maya. Maya, thank you so much for spending time with us here today.
No drama. Thank you very much for having me.
Wonderful. So that's what I have for you for this week. If you like this episode with Maya, please let us know by leaving a review. Our goal is to change the conversation around ADHD, helping as many women as we possibly can learn how their ADHD brains work, so that they too may discover their amazing strengths. Don't forget to order my book, ADHD for Smartass Women, with HarperCollins William Morrow, ADHDforsmartwomen.com/book. That's the URL. As always, you're listening to ADHD for Smartass Women. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you here next week.